The intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment.
What are you talking about?
Swati, this is the definition of science according to Google, which morons like us will learn by heart, but our next speaker has assimilated it.
Now I will request Professor Ajay Sharma, Director NIT Delhi, and Dr Anil Kakodkar to be seated on the stage.
Chairperson of current session, Professor Ajay Sharma. Professor Ajay Sharma completed his PE in electronics from Punjab University. He completed his MS in electronics from Big Pilani in 94 and PhD in 1999. He has a significant industrial experience. Currently, he is serving as a director for NIT Delhi. He has published more than 272 research papers in international and national journals. He has also written over 22 books. He is a life member of Indian Society for Technical Education. I request our coordinator to felicitate Professor Ajay Sharma.
Dr. Anil Kakodkar is Indian nuclear scientist and mechanical engineer. He was the chairman of Atomic Energy Commission of India and secretary to Government of India. He was director of Bhabha Atomic Research Centre from 1996 to 2000. Here he was awarded the Padma Vibhushan, India's second highest civilian honor, on 26 January 2009. Apart from playing a major role in Indian nuclear tests, he has at some other positions, and he was the chairman board of governors of IIT Bombay and chairman board of governors NIT Jalandhar, member Atomic Energy Commission, member ONGC Energy Center Trust, chairman Empowered Committee of IIT Reforms, even for NITs. He is fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineering and served during 1999 to 2000. He is fellow of Indian Academy of Sciences and National Academy of Sciences, India, and he is member of International Nuclear Energy Academy and honorary member of World Innovation Foundation. He was member of International Nuclear Safety Advisory Group during 1999 to 2002. He is Board of Governors of BJTI Mumbai and many other achievements. There are long list. I think it will take another 10 to 15 minutes. So he is a well-known personality. I think all of us know Professor Anil Kakodkar. So the name itself is a big introduction. So welcome to this event, the Think India, which has been organized by the leadership of Sunil Ambedkar.
We are eager to be enlightened by your scientific approach. We hand over the task.
Professor Sharma, organizers of this very important meeting, Think India, and friends. What I intend to do is essentially to talk about, in very general terms, in the context of scientific developments in the country, and what is it that we need to do to create what I will say, a better competitive edge for our scientific capability, and through that capability take India forward. As we all know, India is progressing on a fairly rapid economic growth path, and that's a feature that the whole world has taken note of. And so we talk about India becoming an economic superpower and so on and so forth. And of course, as Indians, we all have that dream. We should have that dream, and also let's be realistic. That dream is actually true, and India would sooner or later, I think sooner than later, would become #1 economy in the world. But let's think for a moment, would that be enough? If India's GDP sort of becomes comparable or better than GDP of United States, which is #1 country today, per capita GDP of India would be still far lower, because on the denominator you have our population. And it's not the GDP that determines the quality of life, it's the per capita GDP that really determines the quality of life. And so the first point in terms of setting our goals, setting our ambition, is really, we cannot be content with reaching or becoming the topmost economy in the world. That's not going to bring you the human development index at the level of other countries. This is #1. Of course, you take your GDP to that level, does that necessarily make us the best country in the world? Perhaps not. We just heard a wonderful presentation by Mr. Ambedkar, and so I think it's absolutely clear that we need to create a very good balance of capability in whatever terms one may want to look at it, and the quote-unquote humanness. And it's only on that basis that we would go further. So I thought I'll make that point upfront. Secondly, the economy is growing fast. I think we should recognize that the basic reason, and this is my personal opinion, basic reason for our economy growing fast is actually the number of young people that we have. We are the so-called demographic dividend, the largest youth force that we have. Now everybody has some capability, everybody is doing something of value, and so the collective or the integrated number is this rapid growth in GDP. Are we performing to our best potential? Perhaps not. And so, what is it that we need to do to enhance our capability, to enhance our potential? And I'll come in a few minutes to actually say that there is a huge, big opportunity for us on that its core. That's the second point that I wish to make. So with these two premises that we have a lot of strengths in terms of our youth potential, and so we have tremendous possibility of taking country forward and fulfill our aspiration to be number one country in the world. Now, mention was also made in the previous presentation about our India's heritage, or the way the foreign rulers destroyed our knowledge systems. Now, it's a historical fact that till the year 1600 or 1700, India's GDP was in fact highest in the world. It was number one country, and that is only 500 years ago, not too long ago. But that is the period when the slide down started, and by the time we became independent, that is, during the subsequent foreign rule, our GDP compared to global GDP became actually insignificant. Look at it differently. The period up to the year 1600, 1700 actually coincides with agrarian era. Period in the sense, on one side, what was the Indian capability, or what has been the Indian capability, but we should also see that in the context of the capability of other countries. And thanks to importance of knowledge in those times, and although it was agrarian era, not that India did not have technology. India had a lot of technologies, as was mentioned. We were the best in textiles, we were the best in metallurgy, we were the best in our healthcare system, and so on and so forth. But the era beyond 1600, 1700 really coincides with the industrial era. There was the dawn of industrial era in the West, and it's not just a question of human capability. There are a lot of the policies pursued by different countries, policies pursued by our external rulers, and so on and so forth. But the fact is, we could not cope up with the challenges of industrial era, and so the other countries made a very rapid progress. So we perhaps went down a little bit because our resources got exploited by others rather than our doing so here. And now the question is, we have come to this point of time. Today we are in the knowledge era. We all know that today's era is the knowledge era. We must recognize that knowledge era, in fact, it allows tremendous amount of decentralization of economic activity. Knowledge era is very supportive of democratization, equal opportunities. It's not as if I am born with silver spoon in my mouth, I have great opportunities, and if I am born to poor parents in a remote village in India, I will have zero opportunities. Well, to some extent that parameter may count, but in knowledge era, I think you can see in a single generation a huge big change. Just to give you an actual example, and I think there are literally thousands or tens of thousands examples like that. In atomic energy, we started this institution called NICER, similar to ICERS. And we admit students out of a national test. It's called NEST. In, I think, very first year or second year of that institution's existence, a young girl from Uttar Pradesh, from a small village, extremely poor family, illiterate parents. She of course did extremely well in her 12th standard, appeared for NEST, qualified, so she was called for the so-called counseling session. They asked a question, the counselors asked a question, you have done so well here, why did you not appear for JEE? And her answer was, I don't know whether I would have made the grade, but even if I had made the grade, even if I would have got free sheet, but still I am not in a position to visualize that I could have afforded the campus life. On the other hand, she said, ICERS, you get this Inspire Fellowship. So it says here I will get this Inspire Fellowship. Half the money I will use for my own sustaining in the campus. Half the money I will spend to my parents, send to my parents. So he says, unless I am able to take care of my parents, my further education is unthinkable. Alright? Thanks to this Inspire Fellowship, she decided to continue MSc. She finished MSc. She was of course a very bright student, and that's how she got selected after 12th. After finishing MSc, her next destination was Stanford University for doing PhD. So the point I'm talking about is, in one generation you can make a huge big difference based on power of knowledge. Same thing, if somebody thinks of being a good, takes a challenge of being an entrepreneur, and even if we are well-to-do, come from a well-to-do family, and so, but on the basis of that spirit of entrepreneurship, driven by trading mindset, but entrepreneurial mindset. And it's not unthinkable that in one generation compared to the previous, the next generation, you go upwards, leaps and bounds. And that is the difference between the power of knowledge and the absence of it. I think we need to recognize that although we had this tremendous knowledge heritage, in the intervening period, when we almost lost that heritage, by and large the mindset of our Indian people, we had business mindset, we had traders mindset. Many Indians have gone to foreign shores, but essentially with traders mindset. What is traders mindset? I buy something from some place, sell something some other place, and of course make a profit on the basis of margins. So it's an incremental business. If you're talking about entrepreneurship, what you really do is you start with some inputs, whatever they are, but you value add. And particularly in the context of knowledge, that value addition is not by percentage. Many times it's by multiples. faster growth of economy as a result of leveraging knowledge is one factor. I think we need to be prepared for us. We have to prepare our young people for doing so. But there is a much bigger advantage out of this transition to knowledge era, and that is, imagine that you have a society and you have economic activities in the society, and they will have to be connected with each other anyway, because well, everybody has to make a living, you have to earn money, so there will be that connection between society and the economic activity. Of course, the knowledge domain always exists, and it existed all along. You cannot say that knowledge domain finished. But the knowledge domain achieved some kind of exclusivity, remaining somewhere there, not connected with the society, not connected with the economy. As if everything else is a low-level activity, whereas people engaged in knowledge, they are kind of more important people. And then, of course, the economic activities get carried through, as I said, with the trader's mindset. And that actually, while you can see some economic progress, and larger the number of people engaged in that, you will see growth. But you will not see improvement in the values of the society. Because there, the value system is governed by the activities that happen in the society. When we talk about knowledge society, we are actually talking about a much deeper engagement of knowledge domain, both with the society as well as with the economic activity. As I said, in the sense, value addition being happening in multiples, not in percentage. But if you look at it from a somewhat larger, somewhat broader perspective, you would find that this knowledge activity engaging very strongly with the society and economy, you don't have to preach people about higher values, do this, don't do that, and so on. If you have real activities going through on the basis of knowledge, you will find those values will automatically get improved. Of course, there is a rider. And that rider is, many times, you say knowledge is power. I come from the field of science. Science delivers technology, and technology is even bigger power. And we also know power corrupts. Human beings tend to become arrogant. So when you are talking about knowledge, when you are talking about preparing people to engage the knowledge domain into other segments, we should simultaneously talk about education, which enhances capability of people to leverage knowledge for economy on one side. But also, we should talk about education which converts them or which encourages young people to become better human beings. Inculcate some value. I am very glad to hear that question, that at college level, what happens to value education? I think extremely important. I must tell you, even in school level, many places it has vanished. And I, for one, actually do not believe that you keep children 100 times, Hamesha Satya Bolo. I don't think children will talk truth on that. But if you have an environment, education environment, particularly family environment or other societal environment, where children see this being practiced, you don't have to preach them anything, it will happen. On different situational conditions, they see their parents, they see their elders, how they behave under different situations. And that's a tremendous learning. And I do believe that education system is a very important place to kind of create such mentorship, to make these young people better human beings. And if we achieve that, an education system which empowers individuals, both in terms of their capability to leverage knowledge for economic progress, as well as elevates them as individuals, I think then there will be no stopping of this country. And that is, I have realized this by way of an actual practice, and I will tell you why. See, as you know, I come from atomic energy, and I have spent the whole time doing technologies. Technologies which were denied to us. Technologies which has made India into a different class of global countries. But when I asked a question to myself, in one of the reasons why we have created nicer or Center for Basic Science in Mumbai University, these are essentially programs of integrated science education, +2 onwards, all the way up to masters. And that was because I realized at that time that we've done so much of technology. I, for one, am very proud of what I have done. When I ask a question, how many of those technologies are technologies which are first time in the world? We talk about in ancient times we have built technologies which were first time in the world, marvels considered by the world at large. How many of such technologies we are doing these days? And you will find you don't have a satisfactory answer. So the next step was I started looking Google uncle, as Mr. Ambedkar said. I call them Google Baba. But you can get some good data. You don't need to be drifted, but you certainly can get good data. So I started looking at how much money we are spending on R&D. Because we know we are not spending even 2% of our GDP on R&D. There are countries which spend 4%, 6%. So there is a case for putting in more resources in R&D. There is actually a much bigger case for putting more in education. But only putting money, will it help? And to answer that question, I asked a question to myself. All right, we should put in more investment, but whatever investment we have put in, what have we done? Are we producing commensurate results? So there is Betel R&D magazine, and they bring out investments made by different countries in R&D year after year. We have a habit of looking at comparing with America, comparing with China. They spend, of course, much more than us. So we say, okay, they spend much more than us, so they have achieved better results. But look at other countries. Countries like Israel, countries like Sweden. All our Volvo buses come from, maybe manufactured here, earlier they came from, but that's a Swedish technology. Countries like Switzerland, Finland, Nokia, even United Kingdom. We spend more money on R&D compared to these countries. Are we comparable to these countries in terms of our technology capability? If we are not, then we have to find out what is lacking. And what is lacking, my answer, because I've gone through a fair bit of work and this is not the time when I will go through in great detail. But my answer is that shortcoming of ours has its roots in a socio-cultural issue rather than an issue of education or issue of science management. You want evidence for that? I will only bring out that as recently as I think a few weeks back, after post Mr. Trump taking over as presidency and this visa issue, a think tank in US itself, which has been doing this policy analysis or policy research, there are two things they have figured out and they have published, the report has come out. Number one, they have said that they have looked at what is the contribution of immigrants to larger than $1 billion startups to United States. And then they listed the countries from where these immigrants came. And the answer is India occupies top of the table. So young Indians going from here can create $1 billion startups and occupy the top of the table in the United States. There is another study which classified or ranked universities world over on the basis of number of founders who have created new investment exceeding $1 billion, for example. IITs have been ranked 4th best in the world. So we're not talking about being within 200, being within 100. Their rank is as high as 4th in the world. Certainly we should be celebrating that. We have to answer that question. If IITs can do that, why not all other engineering institutions at least, or all other universities in the country? So one is bridging the gap between our best institutions and the rest. But what about this question that this has happened by way of alumni going from IITs, but it has happened in the United States. It didn't happen in India. There are more larger number of alumni in India. So why it didn't happen in India? So the point is, while we have to certainly improve our education system, improve our research and development system, bridge the gap between the best and the others, we have to also answer this question that why is it that, and we all know, a young Indian, we see, ठीक है, होशियार लड़का है, लड़की है, nothing big about it. He goes abroad and suddenly big things happen. And then we say, अरे हमें तो मालूम ही नहीं था, इतना bright student है. So I think there is something in terms of, and that's how they say United States is the land of opportunities. India is the land of ideas. There is no dearth of ideas in India. Absolutely no dearth. But we talk about innovation, which has become a buzzword. Innovation is about ability to translate an idea and take it to the marketplace, take it to the society. Just having an idea, my idea is as good as yours, and both of them mean nothing to me unless they can be taken forward. So innovation is about ability to translate that idea to its logical conclusion. And we need to create what I call conducive innovation ecosystem where that idea can be translated. And this, I say, is more a socio-cultural problem of mindset of our people, problem of silo mentality, which we are very strong in our psyche. And I think we need to get to it. So just like we need to get good values as a part of our education, I think we need to expose young children to inculcate these habits. You have to transform the society to adopt these methods. And you will notice that it is actually in sync with what we just heard from Mr. Ambedkar. We are talking, of course we are talking, we want to be competitive, we want to run the race. But not with the sense of greed. Not with the sense that, well, you know, I have an opportunity, let us grab everything to myself. So, not to make anybody else a part of my team. Then you can do only that much, what an individual can do. And you cannot do. So the point is, you want to create a product. I'm just giving an example. You want to create a product. Product does not distinguish whether somebody who has done engineering can create that product or somebody who has done finance can create that business. Product is a product. Depending on that product, you have to leverage different branches of knowledge. And it is unlikely that a single individual would be expert in all those branches. And you want to create a successful product, you must team up, you must create a team. You know, any enterprise when you create, you have to have a team. Thanks to the young people, today you do find that kind of thing happening. There are startup movement in India which is taking roots. But the point is, how much of it is a part of our education system? You want to carry out research. One way of doing research is that I select a topic. What is the basis of selecting that topic of research? मुझे 3-4 साल में PhD मिलनी चाहिए. So I do research which will get me a degree within that 3 to 4 years. I don't want to take the risk that, well, you know, problem solve नहीं होगा तो 5-6 साल लग जाएंगे, शायद नहीं होगा, PhD नहीं मिलेगी. So you do research that can be done, and you keep away the research that is required to be done. If I identify the problems before my country and decide that I will solve it, and that becomes the basis of defining my research problem, then you don't worry about whether I can do it in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. I will still carry on that path. Maybe doing so I may not get my PhD. So what? If I am clear on my path, I will succeed someday, and I am just looking forward to that day, not PhD. The question is, there is a huge risk averseness in our society. If I do something in 4 साल में मुझे PhD नहीं मिली, सब लोग मुझे बोलेंगे ये निकम्मा आदमी है. On the other hand, society should, the environment should be such that people understand the importance of problem I am trying to solve. If I am having difficulties, maybe people should come and support because I am attending to an important cause, important problem. And bring in all the resources that are necessary to solve that problem, because it's ultimately the solving of that problem, important problem, that takes country forward. My getting PhD doesn't take country forward. And that is the change that I think we need to seek to achieve. And so you want to achieve that, just as there has to be a relook on the education front at the school level, college level. Even at research level, you should be able to talk about group research. Individual research is important. You want to push the frontiers of knowledge. You want to take this subject forward. One of the questions you ask when somebody does PhD, what is the new contribution to knowledge you have made? It's important. But over and above that, that should be always there. There is no belittling of that. But over and above that, there must be equally large space for group research, where you look for important problems in the society, economy, industry, and address that problem leveraging all disciplines that are required to be brought in. And if you are able to do that, then you are talking about a different kind of universities. Do we have that in our universities? I would say 90% of universities do not have that atmosphere. If they do not have that atmosphere, no wonder that we are not able to translate our investment in research into economic good. I would go one step further. When you have that problem-solving spirit, the spirit or a drive to solve important problems without being afraid of whether I will meet a success or failure, even when one is engaged in individual problems of basic research, you would find the quality of your research goes up. You look at the best universities in the world, and you would often find that, okay, such and such a research group, they have, let's say, they have a Nobel laureate on the faculty. Nobel prizes are always given for something very basic contribution. But you will find same Nobel laureate is also a president of some company which is doing business on the basis of that scientist's research. They coexist. So we can't keep this mindset, as I said earlier, that this knowledge is something which is, it's an elite thing, sits somewhere else, nothing to do with society. I think we need to shed that mindset. We need to shed this fear that if I involve other colleagues, other friends, make a larger team, then I'll only creating people who will share my advantage or share my achievements. I want to keep everything to myself. In the process, of course, you don't take yourself forward and, of course, deprive the country from moving forward. So I think this spirit of group research has a lot to do with our cultural upbringing, and I think we must pay very serious attention to that aspect. The last point that I wish to make, and I will stop, is about I go to school, several things are taught to me, but then I get that as if some information is given. In the textbook, certain things are written. Teacher teaches that there are some, as if there are model questions and model answers, and the student wants to repeat that exactly same answer into the examination. Answer paper. I remember when my daughter was in school, I thought, let me do the job of a good father. So I said, okay, let her teach her. I found it very difficult to teach her because the way she was taught and the way I understood, there are two different things. And when I tried to explain to my daughter that, look, this is the more fundamental part, you must know. She said, Daddy, if I do that in my answer, my teacher will cut my marks. Because this is not the same as quote-unquote model answer. And so I decided, okay, I am not going to interfere because I don't want to come in way of my child's career. So I said, okay, you study the way your teacher has taught you and answer according to what your teacher said. I don't interfere. I don't think we need an education system of that kind. What good is that examination? Even if my daughter stood first, What is the point? It makes no difference. So the point is, today our education system is information in, information out. I think you must ask that question, how much of knowledge is getting inculcated. I will quote just one example, and this is from JEE, and it has come to me from a very senior and very knowledgeable faculty from IIT, physics faculty. So this faculty noticed, JEE is a very kind of, you maintain secrecy, so a question paper was sent by somebody. This faculty was, so he saw that question paper and he found that one of the questions was very difficult. So he said, that question, faculty said, I took 2 days to figure out what that question was and another 2 days to solve that question. So I was very curious about when the students came to his class. He was very curious whether anybody had attempted that question. So he asked, how many of you have solved that question? So 3-4 people stood up. So he asked, what was your answer? So the student gave the answer, and the answer was correct. So he got marks, so he came to IIT. So the professor decided to probe him a little bit further, and he found that the student was hollow. He had given correct answer, but he was hollow in that subject. That is what I mean by information in, information out. And I think it's important, if you want to convert India into a true knowledge society, we must make sure that through our education system we impart knowledge. And actually you don't impart knowledge. To somebody to say that I am very knowledgeable, I impart knowledge, that is actually wrong according to me. You have to engage with student to help the learning process of the student. And so it's actually mentoring of a learning process. And if you do like that and create opportunities, not just not create that environment in the classroom alone, but the same environment in the lab, same environment in the workplace, you create some hands-on opportunities, that will actually empower our youth to be the competent members of the so-called true knowledge society. And if that happens, I think after that, getting India's per capita GDP better than the best in the world, or India becoming superpower, both in terms of economy, in terms of knowledge, in terms of technology, I think all that will happen just like that, because we have so much of demographic dividend. So I think in my perception of what we need to do to take India forward is to actually focus on school education, college education, research level, not from the perspective of whether how much is the enrollment ratio or how much is the whether I am able to conduct exams and what marks students get and things like that, but from the perspective of creating a true ecosystem for encouraging learning process. And I think we need to move in that direction. Thank you very much.
Is there any questions?
So it is whether free scientists are left in India. The reason being most of the youth, even if they are incredibly talented, if they want to get something for the benefit of the nation, they're either forced into slavery or starvation. Because either you work for an MNC, either you become a CEO of a XYZ MNC, or you work go abroad, or you take money from VCs who are again someone with vested interest and usually settled above. If you go to an Indian VC, they say show me profit, paisa kahan se aayega. And otherwise the second option is to starve. So how can we create ISRO-like institution in different technologies which are very essential for India?
Well, See, both atomic energy and ISRO came through legacy of Dr. Bhabha. Bhabha used to say that you challenge our young people and you will get the results. You create atmosphere, you create facilities and challenge them. This is what you don't have to tell them how you want to achieve. You just say, I want this done and leave it to them. It will happen. Trust in the power of young people and just empower them, create that environment. And I think, I'm not saying only Indian youth, all youth will do this. No issue. Of course, you need to create that environment. You cannot expect a young man in an isolated manner, he must be a topper and say, okay, you are bright, you solve problems for this country. You must have a framework within which you operate. So, it's the job of planners to create that environment. An environment where there is uninterrupted, unhindered kind of possibility of performance. And you just put a challenge, pose a challenge. I think 9 out of 10 cases the challenge will be answered. It is, to me, it is as simple as that. The problem is we don't do that.
The backing is the issue.
Yeah, backing has to be. The question is, how does one learn swimming? I remember for me when I was a child, you tie that float and then we used to go to the river. And then of course I used to swim every day but with that float at the back. I never learned swimming. So one of my elder friend, he said, yeah, aisa nahi sikhega. He removed the float and threw me in water. And it was a great surprise for me that I started swimming on that day. So I think you must trust our young people and create comfort. Yeah.
That's science related. So you must have seen Dr. Strange Love and the Doomsday Device.
Doctor?
Strange Love, the movie, and the Doomsday Device.
No, I don't see many movies.
That's about the nuclear doomsday device. And if you throw one bomb on USSR, the entire world will go automatic. So we are going towards a direction where science is becoming too strong. In ancient times, our forefathers took the technology of Brahmastra away because they did not trust the humans to use it well. But now, even I can write a small code which can use Google Bhabha face detection, your chat messengers detection of where you are, and I can program a drone to shoot you, face detect you and shoot you. This is possible. I can write the code and I can say, repeat loop entire humanity, I can sleep. Even if I did it in half sleep or madness, I had a drink or something, this is going to hurt. So now the technology is not without conscience. So how do we make this danger go away? That how can India give the same knowledge that don't use the technology for destructive purpose?
Well, actually, as was made in the previous presentation, technology is value neutral, always. So I have been always saying, there is nothing like a good technology or a bad technology. Even simple mundane thing as discovery of steel, whether you can make a plow, you can make a sword, you can make a cannon. So technology is actually value neutral. Same thing is true with even atomic weapons. Whether technology is good or bad is actually, it lies in human mind. How you want to use that technology. And so that's where the importance of value becomes very important. And as I said, that's where that is one of the attributes, according to me, of a good knowledge society. That mindset of entrepreneurship based on knowledge-driven progress. There is a material side to it, there is a spiritual, philosophical side to it. And I think both have to be integral part of education. And if that happens, then I think this problem will not be there. Okay. internet is a good thing, but then institution or even families after family, we keep a watch on children. What do they do on internet? So the question is, we are worried that children will get into bad habits because of that exposure. But the answer does not lie in preventing children from getting into those exposures. Answer lies in inculcating a spirit of self-responsibility, a spirit of value. And children by themselves do not go that path, but make use of internet to the best of advantage. You can get tremendous advantage out of internet. So again, just like the technology, there is nothing good or bad about it. Good or bad lies in your mind. And so upbringing of children is an extremely valuable thing. So when it comes to career choices of children, I think parents must come to this, who are we to decide that children should do something? Do we know what are the opportunities today? We know opportunities which were there in our times. Children know this thing much better. As long as you have created the children with right values, right ability to make choices, make decisions, decide their paths, leave it to them. Whether it involves risk or it doesn't, as long as they like it, they have passion of doing it, I think there is 9 out of 10 chance that they will be successful. Why do we think that we have seen maybe 30, 40 years more than children, so we know more? It's not true. So that's the cultural change, and if that happens, issue of economical thing will always address. What was the second question? I forgot.
How to integrate, a lot of money is being spent in our country on research on social sciences.
Social scientists. Well, I think, according to me, I have a very simple yardstick. Any research, how do you measure the output or how do you measure the importance? You measure by impact factor. Of course, in our place, we always say how many papers you have published. And then like counting notes, you count papers and say you are a good researcher. That's terrible. Quality of research is judged by the recognition of peers. Any creative activity, you put 10 musicians and you want to decide who is the better artist of that lot. We cannot put an audience like this and say you raise your hands. How many votes you get? Those who get more votes is a better artist. That's not the way. You bring peers, but people who know that particular art form, and it's for them to decide who is a better thing. So similarly, scientists, the sort of worth of scientists' work has to be decided by peers. So that's a very fundamental rule. You cannot be deciding that by issuing a rule from UGC or wherever. It doesn't work that way. This is one of the big problems we have. So coming to social scientists, I think the same thing applies. I would say the worth of social scientists, I would decide by how many social problems have been solved. And so, in fact, social science in our country tends to prepare more activists than people who solve problems. And I have been singularly telling them, including in some convocations, that for God's sake, you want to get into social activism, first understand how to solve problems. With zero ability to solve problem, if you become social activist, in my view, you are actually being irresponsible. So that's the way I would judge. People may not agree, but that's it. Why do I care?
Last
तो एक क्वेश्चन के बाद दूसरा क्वेश्चन होता है, मतलब क्वेश्चन के बाद क्वेश्चन. तो एक टाइम ऐसा आता था
I think you are 100% right. And this problem is not restricted to parents and child. This problem is also there at workplace. I can tell you, because I have seen many work situations, a young fellow, he joined a particular research group. Very bright, very enthusiastic. The supervisor was not all that capable. So he said, but he wanted, if my colleague there has 10 people under him, I must have at least more than 10. Because it's an empire building. It's a very common tendency amongst us. But then I didn't even know how to define a problem for this young colleague who has joined me yesterday. So he told something which was actually a very pedestrian problem. So this fellow went to the room, solved that problem, next day came, sir, this is the answer to what you told me yesterday. हाँ बहुत अच्छा ठीक तो पूछा सर का अगला प्रॉब्लम अभी नहीं यार कल आओ कल बताएंगे this fellow went next day so he told something again within one day came back because this fellow could not even define a good problem. This was the problem. After such 2-3 iterations, the student again asked, sir, next problem. So the reply given by the superior was, अरे 7-8 दिन काम नहीं करोगे तो दुनिया ठप नहीं हो जाएगी, बहुत तकलीफ मत दो. And this is when that young chap came to me and said, sir, this is what is happening. And I of course pulled up this man. So what you are saying is actually prevalent across our society, including in private institutions, I must tell you this.
Boss is always right.
Boss is always right. And so, thank you for being so explicit, I didn't want to. But when I said you need to create cultural change, this is exactly what I mean. This is exactly what I mean. Okay?